Hello. In a little while, I may need is this on? Okay. In a little while, I may need 5 or 6 of you to just reach down, pick up the tissue box, and chuck it at me, all right? Because I don't know if it's going to be enough tonight. All right. Have you ever wished that you were someone different? Have you ever thought that maybe God made a mistake with your personality or your gifting, or probably more importantly, your weaknesses? You know, there are many times where I can think big picture and I know that God doesn't make mistakes. But there are also many times that I can look at myself and think that, well, I make mistakes. And maybe those mistakes have led me down a road that God never intended. Or maybe it's turned me into someone that I was never meant to be, and therefore can't fulfill my purpose. It's a pretty awful place to be, but I do go there. You know, a couple months ago, our 10-minute speaker was Kristen Kittle, who's here today, and she really impacted me because she was speaking about something that she was still struggling with, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. Because sometimes the journey is longer than you want it to be, right? So here we go. I wish I was more personable. I wish I was friendlier. I wish it didn't take me so long to warm up to people. I wish I could have a conversation with a stranger and not feel awkward. I wish that I was a hugger. And I wish, more importantly than anything else, that I didn't follow so many rules and still follow so many rules. Well, for now, this has been serious enough, so let's have a little fun. Does anyone know the game or the little joke that Jeff Foxworthy did, You Might Be a Redneck When? All right, well, let's do You Might Be a Perfectionist When, all right? Can we have a little fun here? All right, the first one. See if you can relate to any of these, okay? You might be a perfectionist if, when you were a child, you would count the steps to the bus stop every day. And every day, as you got closer to the bus stop, if the number wasn't the same as yesterday, you would either take bigger steps or smaller steps to make sure that number was the same. Anyone? Anyone? No, just me. All right. Number 2, you might be a perfectionist if, to you, this is not just a ruler, and you don't just use it to measure things. But you take this lovely instrument, and you use it to underline your notes in school so that your notes are perfect. Anyone? Anyone? Oh, good. I'm not alone in that one. You might be a perfectionist if you take a bag of M&Ms or Skittles, and before you eat them, do you know where I'm going with this? You dump them out, and then you sort them by color, and then you eat them so that there's the same number of color in each, right? Anyone? Oh, good, I'm getting more. I'm not alone. All right, one more. Number 4, you might be a perfectionist if, and if you'll go ahead and put that first slide up, that'd be great. All right, you might be a perfectionist if, like me, when you first saw that, my first thought, I promise you, my first thought when I saw this in my gut was, they didn't follow the directions. They just didn't follow directions. It says 3 words. They have 4. Now, don't get me wrong. About 4 to 5 seconds into looking at that, I realized the humor and I laughed, so I'm not completely gone. But anyone else? Anyone have that initial anger of, wait a minute, they didn't do it right? Okay. Well, so obviously I am a card-carrying, color inside the lines, perfectionist, square, yes, maybe even boring person. Let me share a little story with you for my childhood to help in case the point hasn't been solidified yet. When I was 15, my parents it was the Super Bowl, okay? I have a very athletic family, sports-oriented. So I invited one of my friends over, 15 years old, and she probably would have passed this perfectionist test along with me, by the way. And she came over, and my parents went off to their own party, my brother was at a neighbor's house, so it was just she and I at the house, and we thought we'd have this awesome Super Bowl party. So we had our turkey chili in the crock pot, we ordered our pizza, we had our soda, we were watching the commercials, everything was great. Well, we had a lot of fun, and then at the end of the night, her dad was coming to pick her up, and so we were shoving the pizza back into the box that we hadn't eaten and shoving the box into the refrigerator, okay? I realize that's probably not the smartest way to do it now, but that's what we were doing. So we're pushing the pizza box in, and my dad had a couple cans of beer in the back of the fridge. And so I'm shoving the box in, and you know, I'm such a rule follower, and I led such a sheltered life that I had no idea this could even happen. But I pushed it in, the pizza box hit the can of beer, it fell, it rolled, somehow it punctured, there was a hole, it got punctured in it, and all of a sudden beer spraying everywhere, like on me and on the floor and in the fridge, on the pizza box, and I didn't know, so I run it over to the sink. That's right, I didn't even drink it. I didn't even put it up to my mouth, 15 years old. Ran over to the sink, poured it all out. My friend helped me clean up, and we thought everything was good. So I threw the can away in the trash can and went to bed. Well, the next morning, I woke up, came downstairs, and my mom was sitting there with a smug look on her face. And she's like, "So, did you have fun?" "Well, yeah, I had fun, Mom." "I see." "So, did you have a lot of fun?" I said, "I guess so. Did you?" And she said, "Can you explain why there's a beer can in the trash can?" I said, "Oh, yeah." And I explained the story. The sad part is she believed me because she knew it was true. She knew that I would not break the rules. She knew that I was a rule follower. And you know what? I could tell that she was saddened by this. She was truly disappointed that I had not done anything wrong, because that's not what I do. I never lied, I never cheated, I never stole. I didn't drink till I was 21. I followed every rule. I dotted every I crossed every T. I got the straight A's. I was number 1 on the tennis team. I was on every club. And today, I wish I hadn't. So fast forward, and I get married. And so I have my perfect looking life, right? And my perfect life now involves someone else who is probably a lot of a rule follower as well. And what happened was, about 3 years into the marriage, we thought we wanted to start a family. And so we started trying. But here's the problem. My perfect life came crashing down because I suddenly lost control. I had no control about what happened when we started to have a family. We struggled with infertility for 3.5 years. We saw all the doctors. We had all the tests done. And I was so angry. I was angry because this wasn't the perfect life that I had planned. This was not coloring inside the lines. This was not what I had imagined. And so every morning while we were trying and having tests done and things like that, I went into the room next to our bedroom to have my quiet time every morning real early. And it was devoid of any furniture. We had not decorated. We had painted the walls some gender-neutral color, but otherwise it was completely empty. So for 3 years, I went into that room, and I had my quiet time, but it wasn't exactly quiet because I was angry. Because I was trying to color inside the lines, and I thought, if I colored inside the lines and I followed all the rules, then shouldn't it be easy for me? Shouldn't I get rewarded in some way? And so I would yell at God, and I would beg him and plead with him and say, I don't understand. If any of you have dealt with infertility, you know the pain and the shame that can cause. And I accepted that shame. I accepted I have no control. I'm not perfect. This is not right. Well, my prayers changed, and finally I understood that it was God's will. And I said, my prayers changed to God, just help me be okay with whatever your will is. 7.5 months later, my husband and I were bringing home our son from Russia. And I finally, at least a piece of me, understood I still had a long way to go. I still have a long way to go, but a piece of me understood that my perfect life and my perfect plan sometimes isn't the best. And color as much as I want in the lines, I live in a world where it gets messy. So we brought home our son, and I thought, all right, we're going to be the perfect parents. Boy, is he lucky to have found us, right? Well, our son is amazing. He has the biggest heart in the world. And let me give you an example. When he was 4 years old, we were walking into church with our neighbors. And the husband didn't have a coat, and it was winter, and he was cold, and he said, "Man, it's cold out here." And my 4-year-old son took off his 4-year-old size jacket, handed it to him, and said, "Here you go, Mr. Bryan. I don't need it." He has a huge heart. But he does not have that type A personality. He does not color in the lines. In fact, he was diagnosed with multiple ABC letter diagnoses, a list that would rival even Kim's, okay? From ADHD to OCD to anxiety, he's highly gifted, both creativity and IQ is through the roof. So he doesn't think like my husband and I do. And so it was really difficult because when he entered the school system, he didn't exactly fit in. He wouldn't sit in his chair. He could think and focus on 12 different things at once, but teachers seemed to assume that maybe that was inappropriate. He would be a jokester, the class clown. His answers were so creative that, in essence, they were wrong, even though if you really thought about it, they were pretty amazing answers to questions. Well, I struggled with that because every time I got a call from the principal, or every time he ended up in the office, or every time the teacher said, "I don't know what to do with him," he didn't feel shame. He didn't care. But boy, I did. That was a huge struggle for me. Well, God was about to use this little boy to radically change my life and how I think. He was about to say, "You know what, Cortney? You may be parenting him, you may be raising him, but he's going to teach you some stuff because I need you to learn it." If you'll show the next photo or the next slide, that'd be great. So this is me. I'm not an elephant. That's not what I meant. I meant that's my life. Everything on the outside looks perfect. Everything's colored real neatly. I don't go outside the lines. But that's not what God wanted for me. In fact, when I became a Christian, I was so excited that now I could follow the rules in the Bible. The 10 Commandments, easy peasy. Don't murder? Okay. Don't lie? Sure, got that covered. No, honor your mother and father? All right. But what happened was I was slowly being burdened by the weight of being the perfect Christian. And that's not what God intended. So he brought my son into our lives, and if you'll go to the next slide, this is him. That's my niece. I didn't get her permission to use her face, so I put a little circle on it. But I did get his permission. He's now 12 years old, but in this photo, he's in first grade. Does anyone see anything? Next slide, please. Do you see that? When he was in first grade, he went to the pumpkin patch. And I took this photo. And when I got home, I looked at it. And I just broke down. Because God was telling me, you know what? This boy, the one that you weren't sure you wanted because you weren't ready for adoption, and I had to convince you to do that, but this boy who thinks outside the lines and is totally unlike you, this boy who doesn't care about rules but cares about people, pay attention to him because he's going to teach you something. So this was taken in October of his first grade year. 2 weeks later, I picked him up from school, and he got in the car, and I said, "Hey, bud, how was your day?" And he said, "Oh, Mom, it wasn't good." And I was used to hearing this. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, this time it was PE. You know, he goes, so this is what happened. And he talks real fast, and he talks a lot. And I always listen. And he said, we were getting in line to walk down to the fields, and the PE teacher said, make sure you stay in line, and make sure, all in line, and we're going to meet down there, and don't go off and do something else. And he led the class down to the fields. Well, my son, he always likes to be last in line, so he was last. Well, they were walking down the fields, and lo and behold, as he's walking down, he sees one of his classmates off to the side, and she's looking pretty upset. And so he said, well, what's going on? And she said, I'm trying to tie my shoes, but I don't know how. And she's in tears. And he's like, well, I'll help you tie your shoes. So he steps out of line, and my son bends down, and he ties the shoes of his classmate. And then they both get up and walk down to the fields, but now they're late. So the PE teacher says, run laps. You didn't follow the rules, go run laps. So they ran a few laps as punishment for being late. And my son said, Mom, I was so mad. He didn't even ask me why we were late. And I said, well, it's okay. And he said, no, it's not okay. He goes, but you know what, Mom? I would do it again. And I sat in that car, and I was flooded by God's conviction, because you know what? I would have been a student who stayed in the line and left my classmate behind because I didn't want to break the rules. So he's taught me so much. This boy from the other side of the world that God brought into my life is showing me that relationship is more important than rules. And it's such a valuable lesson because guess what? 6 weeks before that photo was taken, just 6 weeks before that photo, I discovered that my husband was struggling with a sex addiction. And his uncontrolled use of pornography had escalated to multiple extramarital affairs, all without my knowledge. So you can imagine what I was struggling with. You can imagine the rules that were going through my head, the cultural expectations, you deserve better, that he didn't follow the rules of marriage. He didn't honor his vows. He kicked him out. Everything in me wanted to run. And for 6 weeks, I was battling what I wanted to do, what I thought was right. But I was also battling the shame because my marriage wasn't what I thought. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't good. My marriage was so far outside the lines that I would have needed a bottle of whiteout to fix it. But because of in part, there are a lot of reasons why my husband and I are still married, and we are happily married, and we are marriage mentors, and he's been sober for 5.5 years. There are a lot of reasons for that. One small reason is what I've learned from my son about grace and mercy, and how sometimes rules and expectations don't matter. It's the people who matter. If you'll put the next slide up. You know, Jesus colored so far outside the lines that they crucified him for it. And that's what he's called me to do. Outside the lines is where we find the people who need us most. Outside the lines is where we can be his light. This is one of my favorite verses because of my perfectionism. Because I want to be able to own the fact that I have weaknesses. And not just own it and not be ashamed of it, but expose them. Because I know that there is a God greater than all of that. There's a God that brought me my son. There's a God who held my marriage together. And despite my perfectionism, there is a God who loves me beyond all of that. So thanks for letting me share.